So, since our last episode where we talked about non human intelligence, UFOs, UAPs, what's in the news? What's been going on lately with this topic?
So the biggest news is the NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act for 2024. There's an amendment put in there called the Schumer Amendment, and it had all sorts of UFO legislation, and it was being like debated. Like often with these bills and stuff, they discuss it and they take stuff out, put stuff in. They negotiate. And basically, they're like a handful of guys that ironically, they're all linked to um, weapons manufacturers and stuff. They're all like donors from Lockheed and whatever. But these congressmen uh, put their foot down on the UFO aspect of the bill, the Schumer Amendment, and they started basically ripping out all the important stuff. So the biggest thing that happened was it is a step forward at the very least because there's at least some legislation going through. But the two big things in the bill were there was like a part of the Schumer Amendment that was about eminent domain, which would allow basically more or less for Congress to basically seize whatever, uh, craft, whatever type of objects, biologics, whatever like Lockheed has, any weapons manufacturers, these private companies that supposedly are holding this material, they would have eminent domain over it so they could come and, take it basically if they don't give it up. And that got pulled out of the bill, which was huge. So that's like a big hit. And then the other thing that got pulled out, which was important, was I guess what was supposed to happen was there was going to be the president was going to have like a committee under him regarding UAP of like 9 people. And it was going to be like I forget all of them, but it would be like a scientist, an economist, a socialist, like or not socialist, like a psychiatrist. I don't know, like all these people from different fields that would discuss the topic and then kind of plan how to tell the people about it. It's just like a little committee to help push for disclosure, and that got pulled out too. So basically, the two biggest things in the bill got pulled out. I know there was an aspect to it as well where they're following the recent legislation that happened a few years ago about JFK. They put legislation through about the JFK assassination where they promised to release the documents and stuff. So they actually formulated this bill part of it off of that, which isn't great because we never got those documents either. So I don't know exactly what happened with that, but there was like a plan in this bill for at most 25 years, everything will have to be put out. So the biggest story of it is the fact that they pulled out the real juicy stuff, really.
Do you feel like a guy like Chuck Schumer is what we would consider corrupt?
Probably, I would
So, my
assume.
question is why would a guy like that introduce all of these particular details that seem to be against the interest of the establishment?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. Cause like the way I look at it is there has to be at least some benefit. Like all these different factions are fighting over disclosure. People who are trying to keep it hidden, people who are trying to pull it out. Each of them has something to benefit from it. So I'm assuming like because for the most part, our government actually doesn't know anything about this, or they're being like our elected government, our Congress, our Senate. They even the ones like Schumer that are aware of it, they still don't have power to touch it. So I'm assuming they want power to touch it, you know what I mean? Um, because right now it has no real, like, government oversight as far as Congress or the Senate or the House or anything like that. As far as I know, there's really it's, like, all hidden by the Pentagon. So,
So,
there
it
it
does
seems like
make
maybe
sense.
yeah, like, maybe like, our Senate, Congress, our elected officials are trying to pull it from, like, the security state.
Yeah, because it seems that by the way you're describing it, it would be in his best interest to introduce this type of legislation because then they would have congressional oversight. They would be able to put their hands on it if they wanted to technically. So yeah, okay, that does make sense. It's so
But
strange here that for once in our life, it seems that we're like rooting for our government because they're on the right side of this issue.
some of them. So, like,
Some
there's
of
this
them.
guy yeah, this guy, Mike Turner, he's, like, one of the big names that, he's, like, a Republican congressman, and, he represents the district of Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, which is interesting because in, like, UFO lore, Wright-Pat is basically in a lot of stories of crash retrievals and other stuff, it's, like, supposedly at that base, there is, stuff being held, but it's just ironic, he represents that district, and, his biggest donors are, I know, Lockheed, Raytheon, and there's, like, 2 other giant weapons manufacturers that are his, biggest donors. So, it's just, like, right in your face. And then I saw, like, people ask him about it, like, they in an interview, and it's just amazing how this topic is so, like, stigmatized because he could just like, brush it off like it's nothing, and then nobody, inquires any further. It's like it's because too much of the public doesn't know how important this actually is. So it's easy to kind of brush off, like, and he doesn't really have to answer for it that much.
Do these defense contracting companies compete with each other directly, or do you think they work with one another because they're the only ones that seem to have direct access to this technology?
I feel like they might not be working together. I think it might be separate because, like, another big issue with bringing this forward is, there's, like, a huge economic issue as well because, see, this means if this is all true that we recovered craft and we handed it over to, these defense contractors, that means that the government, put favor onto certain companies, private companies. So, like, let's say we gave Lockheed all this stuff, and we didn't give any to Raytheon. So now that's going to affect their stockholders. So it's like showing government favoritism in the free market. So it's like there's a big economic issue there too because this is like billions and billions of dollars with these companies, maybe more with this tech. It could be priceless. Um, but this all comes out, and it turns out the government gave this company something, and their shareholders are benefiting from it, while this company is being hurt from it. Things like that. So that's another issue with it, and it seems like it might just be spread out amongst them a little bit. But I wouldn't be surprised to hear that they weren't working together. It's just all so compartmentalized, from what I understand. So if I had to guess, I would say that they're basically independently working on it. And, I know one of the big parts about this, a repeating, thing that I keep hearing about this is, like, in the public is they really want to they wanna release this stuff so they can get more scientists working on it because it's so compartmentalized where, all of our best minds can't work on it. It's, like, secluded to, like, these small numbers of people in these companies, and, supposedly there's not much progress being made in all these years. I guess they say that, they bring it out and people work on it, they make very little to no progress, and then they put it away for a couple years and bring it back out with other people, and then they've just been doing this for decades and decades.
Yeah, that seems to be the opposite of how we generally conduct ourselves when it comes to like scientific innovation and technology, because you would have such a wide range of viewpoints. Because I know one of the reasons that they said Bob Lazar was brought in was because he had a different perspective than what they usually hired to come on to their, to their programs. So, it seems that if they would let this out and just let everybody open source this type of technology, then they would be able to get farther along. But I understand that there are implications from foreign powers because we aren't the only ones that are in contact with non human intelligences, and we're not the only ones that have crash retrievals, right?
That's what they say. Like, whistleblower Dave Grush, he pretty much talked about it like it's a Cold War, like a weapons race for this stuff, like, kinda how, you know, back in the day, we were all fighting to get the nuke, whoever got the nuclear warhead finished, it's a similar situation happening. Um, but yeah, it's always, like, gonna be the excuse to not put this stuff out due to national security. It's like whoever, makes the most progress with this technology is gonna weaponize it, and they're going to rule the world, basically. Um, but the thing is, it's like you can put this out and allow people to work on it and just not allow them to work on the weapons applications. Like the same way in universities today, we have people in university right now studying like nuclear technology, nuclear physics, nuclear energy, all this different stuff. And so there's no reason why we couldn't have people at least learning and, you know, investigating the technology and not the weapons applications of it.
Yeah, it almost seems to me that there's some sort of financial incentive for them to be keeping this under wraps. I know I've always heard the term or the phrase that the government is 20 years ahead of us in terms of technology or whatever. And I often wonder, like, maybe it's like thousands of years. Maybe they have millions of years of technology that we don't know, and there's a concerted effort or a plan to trickle it out over time, because with technology comes, you talk about shareholders, with technology comes products. And you probably want to, if you're a government that has control of technology that can transform what we think of as a product of, say, energy, just for one example, then you would want to sort of trickle that out to control the market, to control, because man, it seems that technology and the types of things that we would be spending our money on would do like two things. It would make all the other businesses in terms of energy and a lot of the things that we purchase and consume obsolete. It would make a lot of businesses go out of business, and it would make a lot of things far less profitable, which would shake up our economy quite a bit. And it would also introduce the ability for companies to make all kinds of crazy brand new technologies that are probably limitless. And I don't think that there would be a way to sort of control what we could do, because the type of technology we're talking about here is stuff that will completely revolutionize what we think technology even is. So it seems to me that like things would get crazy really really quick in terms of what we'd have access to.
Yeah, I mean, you think about it, like, the main, uh, thing that I imagine they would be interested in is the energy source, because it seems like these things are not using they're clearly not using, like, combustion, who knows what they're using, but if we could tap into the energy source, like, it's speculated that it would basically be free energy, and we wouldn't need to use oil, like, so this would hit our world in, like, every way possible, so would that stop a lot of wars? Probably. I mean, how many wars are fought over oil? If oil becomes irrelevant, if we can have one tiny device power your whole house or power everything you need, I mean, who knows how it works? It could be something so crazy that we couldn't possibly imagine. So I have a feeling that's a big part of keeping it hidden as well, is to just keep this whole game playing of like, fighting over energy and, the it seems like it's possible that we could have abundance from this technology. Like everybody could have abundance. But in order to control people, you have to keep them desperate and lack, it's just a weird game being played.
Yeah, when you talk about abundance being something that would be abundant, um in this world that we live in, we have winners and we have losers. And in order for there to be a winner at the level that America and the Western world is winning, there's got to be a lot of people around the world who are losing hard. And it seems that if abundance becomes more abundant, more accessible, then that dichotomy, that balance would be thrown completely off. I think that's another reason why they want to keep it under wraps because a lot of these countries that uh, are not quote unquote civilized. I just think of Hamas as one of these organizations, or very poor countries. They might have access to a lot of power and a lot of things that could not just make them a physical threat, but also an economic threat.
Yeah, and I often think about this with even just like our technology that we have publicly right now. It's like our science advancements are so crazy, like that we have all this wild technology, but like our spiritual selves, like our consciousness hasn't risen high enough to use this technology properly. So like you think about that with our current tech. So like we are not even remotely close to being spiritually enlightened enough to deal with alien tech or whatever this technology could be if we have it. So, you know, it could be a good idea to keep it hidden. I mean, I understand it. It's like why would they do that? Why would they do this? It's like it makes total sense why they would. Um, we can't handle mostly the stuff we have right now. We could barely handle, social media, let alone like magic technology that could warp you to another dimension or something, who knows? But I've been thinking a lot about like non-human intelligence and this the spiritual aspects of it, cuz it's like you look at even like all these religions speak about non-human intelligence. Like one thing you often hear about people or hear from the people who say, we can't have disclosure, it'll cause chaos in religion and stuff. It's like actually these religious people already have a box for non-human intelligence. It's really the Western secular people who don't have that conception for any non-human intelligence, so they have to have the ET hypothesis. The ET hypothesis is like the secular Western mind's way of conceptualizing a non-human intelligence. But in religions, you have like angels, demons. Um, it's interesting because it does, in a sense. Right now, our world is crazy, and it feels like we're in a spiritual war in a sense.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree. And I don't think that spiritual war has anything to do with religion. I think it has, I mean, it might, because there are different parts of the world where spiritual ideologies are forcing wars to happen. And as part of doctrines, it's like a part of Hamas's whole doctrine is that they don't want any Jews to be alive. They don't want Israel to exist at all. So that would be, definitely a religious undertone to spiritual warfare. But I feel like it's happening on a deeper level
Yes.
where we are right now, and I don't I don't know that I'm afraid of religion being torn to pieces as some of these people say they're scared of. It almost just seems like like this is going to be an evolution of religion, an evolution of spirituality, to where we have more tools, more stories, more archetypes, and just more things at our disposal. It's like we're getting more of the picture now, so we can have a more accurate view of what spirituality can be, both individually and as a collective.
Yeah, and I'd say it's like most definitely this stuff wouldn't or just the acknowledgement that non-human intelligence exists in some fashion among us or interact with us like definitely would not disrupt religion because as I said there's already boxes for this. Like there are people in high positions of power in the US government, Christians, that they don't want anything, they think this is demonic. So they say like they truly believe that this is demons, that this is the demonic, you know, don't we don't want to touch this. and that's what it is to them. Um, so, there's already all these categories in all different forms of religion. Like, have you ever heard of the jinn?
Yes,
So in Islam, they have this concept of the jinn, which is a non-human intelligence. And if you talk to like a Muslim scholar or anybody who actually practices truly, they would tell you probably what we're dealing with is the jinn. And see, this is pretty much the same for all Abrahamic religions. Um, they're all just like kind of different flavors of the same thing, basically. Like the stories mostly are like Christianity and Islam is like so close. I mean, um, but the jinn, it's like in Islam, they believe, and this is interesting to me because this has been around for so long, these ideas. They believe that there is basically our world and overlapping it, not somewhere else, there's like the spirit realm, the spirit world. Depending on your perspective of it, people would say it's like, oh, the demonic realm, or but there is this other place that is inhabited by entities. And Jinn is one of those entities that inhabit this other world, and they have the ability to cross into our world and go back into their world. And see, Jinn are like they're unique. They're not like for instance, like angels. Because see, everybody, even most people, they hear Jinn. I don't know if you would, if this is like what you thought of when you hear this is like a negative connotation, like evil. That's
that's
like
generally the idea.
right.
Yeah,
But the interesting thing about the jinn is that they're not necessarily evil. See, like for instance, angels are ultimately good according to religion because they actually don't have free will. They are completely under God's will. So like they would say we have free will, the angels do not. So they don't choose to do good or bad. They are purely in God's will. But the jinn are free willed like us. So you talk to people who know about this, and they'll tell you that actually, since they have free will, just by that very sentiment, that there are jinn that are good too. And see, all this stuff kind of aligns. If I were a Muslim, I would be looking at this and saying, "This is the jinn." See, the jinn can shapeshift. They can, show themselves as anything they want, as that. They can present themselves in any way. They can put thoughts in your mind, uh, telepathy. So that's a phenomenon that happens with non-human intelligence, UFOs, etc. So there's like a lot of interesting stuff that ties this into religion, and that's just one more like lens you can view this from. And it's in my opinion, it's just as legitimate as any other. I don't see any reason to um to think that the extraterrestrial hypothesis is any more legitimate than a religious perspective. They're both just different lenses to view it through.
yeah, they're both in the sky. We're looking up at them. They have ultra power. They redefine what we believe to be possible. And it seems to me that there may be a new religion forming, in terms of, or again, as I put it before, it's like an evolution of religion, because I feel like a lot of these religions that we're speaking of have been speaking about and describing UFO experiences throughout history. A lot of it, as you said, angels, and a lot of what you said really reminds me of DMT, because you were saying,
Mhm.
there's like this overlaying, like spiritual reality that exists on top of ours, and it can break its way into our reality. We can break through into its reality, just apply the requisite chemical, and we're there.
And what's interesting too is like I think a reason why a lot of religious people think it's demonic is because a lot of people who, like for instance, like Jack Parsons, Aleister Crowley, these people were occultists. And in the occult, you can this is how it goes. They say that you can communicate with these beings and you can get information, downloads. You can do this stuff through the occult. And just by nature, the nature of it being occult, that's demonic from the, standard Christian view. That's like, don't touch this devil stuff. And it's interesting. It's just like it's such a deep story that's happening, and there's so many different ways to view it. But like, I don't know if you've ever seen the Aleister Crowley. He made a drawing. I forget the he was in contact with a being. I forget his name. It's like a short name, like three-letter name. But he was in contact with this being, and there's a famous like sketch of it. He drew the being, and it's interesting because it looks pretty much like a gray alien. Has like a big head. It has more human-like eyes, but a little bigger and wider. Um, but it's interesting now, like you see that from decades and decades and decades ago, and it's like the same thing we're kind of seeing now. And so I do actually believe that there is a link between the occult and this phenomenon, because I mentioned Jack Parsons before. He's the father of rocketry, basically. Um, he claims that, he got the information to build rockets and all this incredible science and mathematics from entities. And like Jack Parsons and Aleister Crowley would go out into the middle of the desert and perform these weird occult rituals, and they were deep into this occult stuff. So there's a definite connection. And even like on a smaller level, like there are a lot of people that report once they dive into the occult, they start seeing, it's like you're opening a door for these type of beings. If they are good, evil, who really knows? We have no idea. One of the things that people believe about these beings too, like if they were, let's say, demonic, they could, because people have experiences, right, with entities, and they might get a message, and then they speak it to other people, and they tell people about the message that they received, and they just believe it to be true. It's like, I saw one of them, and they said this. They said that they were from space, so that's what they are. They're space aliens. But if they are evil, if they are demons, if they're jinn are tricksters, they could be lying to you. Um, a lot of people in from a religious perspective think that they are lying, and the ultimate goal of these type of beings is to convince us, this is from a religious perspective, to convince humanity that they are our gods, that they created us. Because for them that would be the biggest fu to God ever. It would be a spit in the face of God to say that no, there is actually no God. God doesn't exist. They are the gods. They created us. They're the reason for all of this. And there's like
But if
it's
you think
really
about it though, like that doesn't really say much because the idea of God would be above the idea of any type of alien that lived outside of our dimension or outside of our world, right?
right. But from a religious perspective, it does say something. Because, from the religious perspective, God created man.
Or I guess it wouldn't delegitimize God as a concept,
No,
but as the
absolutely not.
creator of man, you as you said, yeah, it
And I
would.
was just talking to someone about this same thing. It's like for me, if the Anunnaki created us, or if any type of being genetically manipulated something on Earth and created, humanity, that doesn't change the fact that there's something that creates all.
Exactly.
Anything you create was created by God by proxy.
Mhm.
um, but yeah,
So
it's
do you
yeah.
think that it's possible we've been like being guided throughout history from second one all the way up until now by whatever this non-human intelligence is? Because you kind of bring up some people who have had this idea of the muse. I know Diana Pasulka talks about it in her book Encounters, that both of that you read and I'm currently reading. um Is it possible that that's what people are tapping into? Like, not even tapping into, but they're receiving messages from some other intelligence that's guiding us up to. I mean, it's like it's hard to accurately determine what is the possible motivation or end goal of what we could be being guided toward. But it almost seems like it's possible that we are being guided by a non human intelligence towards something. We're building toward whatever it is that might be the goal of whatever this intelligence is.
Yeah, and I think that, like you mentioned, where it's guiding us, I think that there's a good chance that these entities have like free will, as you would call it. Like, so for instance, there could be, um, we could be being pulled in multiple directions. That's why, like, I think that there's a lot more wisdom in, religion than people think regarding this topic. I mean, like, angels, demons, like, good and evil, jinn have free will, so it's like, there could be, like, like, a spiritual war is what I'm saying, like, so there could be forces pulling us toward, what we would consider the ultimate good, and then other forces from these entities pulling us, down. You ever heard the, prophet Solomon? Have you heard of Solomon?
I have, but I'm not too familiar with them.
So this is the interesting thing about like the occult too. It's like, so supposedly Solomon was this prophet, and his power was Solomon. Because remember, I mentioned how there are like basically two realms, two worlds, our realm and then the realm of these entities, whatever they may be. Supposedly Solomon had the power of both realms. So he could reach into and commune with that realm and, and our realm. And, so he was, like, super powerful, I guess, and he could command these entities, they would do stuff for him, he was influenced by them, and they say that it's like the occult is so crazy, who knows? But they say that Solomon had all of his secrets, like, what we would consider the occult today, like, a lot of the secrets of what he was doing and the nature of these realms, that were buried under Solomon's temple. And then supposedly what happened, as the story goes, is the Knights Templar dug up these secrets under Solomon's temple. So the Knights Templar got a hold of these secrets, and that's kind of how the occult was brought into like these secret societies, and they have power over these realms, or at least knowledge of them. And and then it goes from the Knights Templar to different societies, and these little secret societies that could possibly still exist today and have more knowledge about these realms, these beings, whatever. And it's just really fascinating.
Is this the holy grail that people talk about? Because it seems like that would be quite the
Yeah.
grail.
Hmm. Yeah, you have power over yeah, it's interesting. I just started, like, researching this a bit, so I'm not, like, super, fluent with it yet. So I'm trying to dive deep into it because it is just so fascinating. Um, and I just find it, like, it's kind of ridiculous in my opinion that we have so many ancient texts, like religious texts, spiritual texts, from Sumer to Islam, Christianity, all these different uh, texts, and they talk about these type of things. They do there. This wisdom does talk about this type of stuff, and we just disregard it. I mean, in the West, we are just so secularized and like kind of embedded in a very specific mode of thinking that we disregard it. But I think that there, even if it's, I'm not saying these things are all true, the religious perspective, but I would imagine that there is some form of wisdom and truth within it. So I think it's worth looking at. And I think a lot of people, including myself, I ignored this kind of perspective for the most part. I remember hearing from people in interviews that are deep into the topic of UFOs that people in our government um, think this is demonic, and I'm like, ah, it's so stupid. It's like I don't want to hear it. I don't want to look into it, and but it is worth looking into. Not that it is demonic, but that there could be some truth about this phenomenon hidden within these ancient texts. But my point basically is that in my opinion, I ignored the whole religious perspective on UFOs. I've always, at least more recently in life, held respect for religion and understood that there is deep wisdom within it, and it's not, you know, just fairy tales or nonsense. But it took even longer for me, even though I had that respect growing, to allow it to inform the UFO phenomenon for me, because I think that there has to be some knowledge within these traditions about this. I mean, they talk about non-human intelligence, that doesn't exist in science. So,
Yeah, there's definitely a connection. And I think there's a connection. The more you look into everything, the more you find it, the more you find that it's connected to everything else.
absolutely.
Um, and I think that this has the UFO phenomenon has a connection with religion, has a connection with the occult, has a connection with psychedelics. It has a connection with science and nature and space. I
Technology,
don't
yep.
think, yeah, I don't think that there's any separation between anything. And the more you look into this kind of stuff, the more that I'm confident in that.
And that's like a an exercise I'll do, like a mental exercise I'll do every now and again. It's like where you just pick like a single object and kind of just connect it. You can connect anything to anything. Like everything is so interconnected, it's insane. And I think a lot of people don't really think about it that way or don't realize it. I know I didn't for the longest time, and now as I'm learning and working forward, I'm starting to see the interconnectedness everywhere. And another interesting thing about the UFO phenomenon and non-human intelligence, whatever it is, it's like you talked about guiding us, but ultimately it is a teacher, is teaching us because it is forcing us to question things and it's forcing us to see interconnectedness. So, like you said, it touches everything. It might take someone to see that within the UFO phenomenon to realize it amongst everything else. It's like because it's really true, like what you said, that the UFOs it touches everything. Like, if you and so anybody who truly dives into the UFO field and non-human intelligence and really truly digs into it and starts looking, you will spread out into, like, especially like spirituality, I think is a huge part. Like, you will start to spread out into these other fields and like investigate this whole other side of reality that we've kind of been suppressing.
Yeah. And, it seems that the UFO phenomenon is one of the more powerful aspects of life and the mystery that allow people to latch on to and adopt some of the ideas of spirituality, science, religion. I mean, there's some people who are absolute atheists who have no curiosity, who don't have that fire within them to understand the world. Then they see a UFO and that all changes. So why is that? It's the same thing with the psychedelic. It's the same thing with, people who find God in other ways. It's like the fact that this is of a very reliable means to find spirituality and to ignite your curiosity says something very, very significant just in itself.
And I think it's like a lot of us, like, especially when we first dive into this subject, we kind of think of the UFOs, non-human intelligence, of like it's like maybe just this weird thing in our reality. But there's a chance, I think, about how it could be like so fundamental to our lives at all times. Like, for instance, you look at humanity in our modern history, just like the modern era of what we know about history. It's like you see like the dark ages, like you see humans kind of doing the same stuff for a long time. And then, within like the last 100 years, it's just boom, skyrockets. Just insane. The technology that out of nowhere we just have. Like, it's just night and day. It's like seriously like two different species. The stuff we're doing now compared to, even 50 years ago, but let alone like 200. It's like night and day. And it's even crazier because you think about this, like how much we've changed with technology and our understanding. And then you look at the key people who brought those things about and you ask them where they got their ideas and they tell you it's from non-human intelligence. Like, what does that mean? So that this isn't just like a Bigfoot in the woods, or like, oh, it's kind of cool and fun to look at. Like, this might be the very most important thing that's happening ever. Like, all of the stuff that we have branches from like these guys like Jack Parsons and these other scientists that either say that they get their information from a non-human intelligence, a lot of these uh, rocketry people, and on top of it, you have like the people who claim to contact with the muse. I mean, I don't know what the correlation between the two might be, but it's like regardless, they're both like huge sources of human creativity, innovation, and knowledge. And it's all coming from a lot of it is coming from ideas that were stemmed from a non human intelligence.
Yeah, I mean, artists say this all the time. Comedians, anybody who's being creative says this constantly that they get their ideas from the ether, the muse, the whatever it may be. And artists oftentimes drive and push culture in different directions. So you can see this behind, as being a driving force behind culture, as being a driving force behind science, and as being a driving force, behind religion and spirituality in general. Because think about the idea of a prophet. A prophet is someone who can basically hear the voice of God. The voice of
Mhm.
God comes down and tells them something, and then they relay it to the community or the tribe or whatever it may be. I mean, all these things are way too familiar to not be connected.
Exactly, and I'm pretty sure, this I don't know if this was the Quran or the Hadith, but in some Islam or Islamic, tradition, I'm pretty sure this is true, that they say that, actually the jinn were the ones to teach humanity music, that these beings showed up and actually gave music to humanity, um, which is, crazy. It's same thing with the music. It's like a something outside of us that is feeding us creativity and innovation. And almost, even people that aren't involved with thinking about things in this way, like a muse or a interdimensional being, whatever. Like most people who have like massive insights or like great creativity, they often will say that it felt like it came from like nowhere, that they didn't do it. It just happened through them. So it's like a common thing amongst just, regular people to feel that or say things like that.
Yeah, I wonder even if the idea to start to perform art in the first place, go back to the cave paintings and stuff. Maybe it was put into their minds at that point in time too. Um, because if they would have contacted some sort of non-human intelligence and gotten their ideas of creativity from the ether or from whatever that may be, they'd really have no way of relaying that information because they didn't have the types of language that we have to convey information and to convey ideas. So they wouldn't have had any sort of means of documenting where they got their idea from or why they began to create art to begin with.
And like how I mentioned with the in this like the story supposedly says that we received music from a non-human intelligence. Well, they were also that also like led to dancing. I guess it was like music and dance came from these entities. And if you look back at like the most ancient shamanic cultures, like you'll see this in Visionary in Graham Hancock's book. These like super ancient shamanic cultures, like thousands and thousands of years back. If you look at their cave paintings, it depicts a lot of dance rituals. And so what these people were doing back then, these like shamanic tribes, they would alter their consciousness through dance. They would um have like a group and a shaman, and they would do these like dance rituals for like 40 hours. Like you'd have to do it for a really long time. And supposedly through this dance and like the exhaustion, I guess the nose of the shaman would start to bleed. And this is depicted in a lot of cave art. And then the shaman would be transported to the spirit realm. So like even just say it were true that dancing was given to us from a non-human intelligence, that is verifiably a technology that is used to enter the spirit realm as far as from the shamanic perspective. So they would do these dances, or it's just the shamans usually would be the ones to enter. And it just seems, as we mentioned before, it's all very interconnected.
Yeah, shamanism in general is very steeped in this type of thing. They talk about the spirits, they talk about the intelligence that they come into contact with. And that makes me think, like, is it possible that nature is a vehicle for these non-human intelligences to communicate with us? I mean, this would bring in, ayahuasca, it would bring in mushrooms, it would bring in any psychedelic substances that come from the earth, or any way that the earth itself could be communicating with with humanity. Again, I bring up Diana Pasulka in her latest book. She talks about this like universal vibration that is the language of the earth, the language of animals, the language of the universe. It's like a vibration that we can tap into so that we can understand what's happening on like a much deeper level. So that kind of reminds me of this concept that we could be, they could be trying to contact us through many ways. Maybe that's what we're seeing when we do see a UFO. We're seeing an attempt to contact us. We're seeing an attempt to convey some sort of information.
And I find it interesting too that, it is my experience, but also you could read it's like many people's experiences, like, that once they begin looking into this stuff, it actually starts to appear more, which I find really fascinating and strange. Um, there's some aspect about being open to it, I think that affects its reality.
And that also brings to mind synchronicities. It almost feels like synchronicities are like an intentional way of whatever this thing is as like telling us, "Hey, you're on the right path. Keep doing what you're doing. I'm going to show you these unimaginable coincidences that have deep meaning to your life." And uh as an indication to tell you like you're on the right path, you're doing the right thing.
And, Diana Pasulka, like, in her new book, she talks a lot about synchronicities too and how it is so connected to this phenomenon. Like, it's not just like it's like there is a clear connection with, synchronicities and UFOs and whatever this stuff is that's going on. And it's weird, like, in the last year, I've had 2 UFO sightings, which is crazy because for basically 30 years of my life, I've had 4 my whole life, and 2 were in the last year, and both of them, I was thinking about UFOs when it happened, which is very it's just what are the chances? I mean, I am a person that does think about this stuff a lot, but it was weird. It triggered that synchronicity feeling. Like, the last one I saw, I was walking to work right down the road at, like, 4:45 AM, still dark out. And, like, I had the thought, like, the feeling of, like, "Let's see a UFO," and then one went right by, like, it was a strange and it was not, it's hard to tell other people that you saw a real UFO, but it was, like, something, anomalous. But, I thought about it, and, there it was. It's very and I know, you told me about the, sighting that you had more recently, like, within a year maybe? And you said
Uh
a similar thing, right?
yeah, it was within a year and it was like 20 seconds or so after less it was probably about 10 seconds after I said let's summon a UFO and then the thing comes and it's like the the amount of things that have to go right for that to happen as a coincidence are just strange, man. And again, we talk about these synchronicities and even Carl Jung goes deep into synchronicity and doesn't really bring up UFOs. So again, this is the connection between non-human intelligence, spirituality. That's why I like the phrase non-human intelligence because it divorces it from the exclusivity of being aliens who pilot UFOs.
Yeah.
It broadens the idea of what non-human intelligence could possibly be, which connects it to literally every possible thing that we can imagine.
Yeah, I think the ET hypothesis is way too limited, and it's very surface level, and it just fits so perfectly into, like, the secular Western mind of, like, scientism and atheism. It fits too perfectly in that, and the phenomenon doesn't present that way. It's far stranger than just, some type of being like us from a different planet. Um, but you mentioned Carl Jung, he did write a book on UFOs, and
Did
he
he?
got in yeah, I haven't read it, but I guess, like, from the very little bit I know about it, is he got into UFOs, and he had this whole, you know, crazy young idea of it, like, it's like a modern archetype, like, it's just something with the human mind, and throughout time, he ended up like, towards the end, I guess he completely changed his tune. He's like, "This is some real shit going on," like,
Oh, you
real
know
in
what?
this sense.
I do
Yeah.
know what you're talking about now. I think he
Mhm.
even theorized it being a projection as well,
Right.
like almost as if we are seeing it as an archetype, like a living archetype, you
Right.
know, and the development of our subconscious and our collective consciousness is what determines exactly what it is we're able to perceive it as, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's basically, from what I understand, like, what he wrote about a lot, and then but I think he like I said, he kind of even changed his tune a little bit on that, and kind of lended it a little more what we would call reality. Um, yeah, but it's fascinating. It's also not a coincidence that, like, a lot of the brightest people uh they are experiencers, which is super interesting. Like, I keep mentioning, like, Jack Parsons, like a lot of the person that there was like a woman who wrote out like all the mathematics that got us to the moon, like just piles of pages of like mathematics that got us to the moon, and she said that she got that from, you know, a non-human intelligence, whatever, some type of channeling, I guess you'd call it.
You just recently bought a Terrence McKenna book, right? Did it? I think it was like a two in one. Did that book include The Invisible Landscape?
No.
So, The Invisible Landscape is essentially Terrence McKenna's uh, accounting of his trip to La Chorrera with Dennis, his brother, where they basically discovered the psilocybin mushroom.
You know what? It
And
might be. I didn't read the book yet, but yeah,
it might
sorry. Yeah.
be. And he talks about an experience that he had near the end of their time at La Chorrera, where he was sitting on top of a mountain and a massive UFO like flies over him. So again, it's like all these people who have these innovative ideas, some of the smartest, most intelligent, innovative people of our time, like you said, they're experiencers.
Um, and the thing that makes it like even weirder and lends me to believe like a spiritual aspect or a non-physical, I don't know, something stranger than just purely ET. Um, like Graham Hancock talks about, I think it might have been his first ayahuasca journey, but I think it happened multiple times for him. In an ayahuasca journey, he would see like what we would imagine an ET looks like. He would see these type of beings, and he would see uh like a UFO, like a machine, which is really crazy because a lot of people who do ayahuasca or smoke DMT, they often talk about like how ayahuasca is more nature oriented. It's like very natural, like the earth, the animals, and a lot of people describe DMT as like almost technological, like you're in the motherboard of some type of machine or something. It's like geometric and same chemical but a different experience. Um, so I think I remember Graham Hancock talking about this, and he was like, it was so strange to be in an ayahuasca journey, and it's like he would have like the serpent. He would always have an experience with the serpent. There would be, all the earth, and then something totally out of place. Boom, a UFO, like a machine, just didn't fit into the ayahuasca realm. But he talks about having that experience.
Yeah, very strange. You know, it almost seems to me that the DMT is the technology. And then, you know, with ayahuasca, depending on where you go, especially, there are so many different mixtures. There's so many different plant alkaloids that become active. So maybe the plant alkaloids that become active are able to sort of harness the technological power of the DMT and use it to its advantage to send us a message about it, about Gaia, about Pachamama, about, you know, Mother Earth.
We need to have like a resurgence of like let's say yoga or something. Like there needs to be like a Harvard professor of the technology of the human being. The technology, I think, because this is talked about with like super ancient cultures. I've mentioned this before that they would, maybe they didn't have the same things we have as far as, our technology, our little machines and stuff, computers. but they studied the technology of the human being. Like, if we put so much time and effort into understanding the human body and what you can do with it, I think it's, endless. I mean, the moment you try a psychedelic and you see what your mind is capable of, what the human is capable of experiencing, it really blows everything apart. And, in the West, we just don't have anything really like a school or, some type of ritual to go through to, work that technology and learn more about it. It's basically just a purely independent venture in the West for the most part. There's no
Yeah.
structure, you know.
There's no
I
like group effort to try to like compare notes.
and that Matthias De Stefano um is the guy that goes on Aubrey Marcus's podcast, and he claims to remember past lives. And then he said that he had a life as a woman in Chem, which was like uh the end of Atlantis, like post Atlantis, I guess. And he said that their whole life, it was like about using the technology of the human body, that like they would have these temples, and each temple would be about like basically working each chakra or something, and you would do specific work with your body in each temple. You would take care of your body in a specific way that would allow you to use your technology, your body, in a way that we have totally lost or just forgotten about. It makes me think about the cyclical nature of our reality. You think about how much the ancients were obsessed with the stars and the sky and the cycles, and you hear about like the great cycle and all these different, you know, uh astrological cycles that happen. They were really in tune with that type of thing. And it makes me wonder if like, you know, we go through these cycles and it has true changes upon the human being and what that iteration of the human expression will be. Like, we're in a version now that just happens to look like insane technological advancements as far as manipulating matter and creating whatever, but maybe in 5,000 years it'll be something totally unimagined, whereas maybe 5,000 years ago it was consciousness, awakening, that type of thing.
And we have no conception as to what is going on up there. We can look at stuff, we can measure stuff, but we don't actually understand what's happening in space. So for us to try to understand what these cycles are and how we relate to them, I think are two different things. Because you know, we could discuss, what we feel like these cycles mean in terms of us and how we evolve and the changes that they might make on what our civilization looks like. But to even come close to understanding any of that, I think we have to look at the cosmos on a much, much deeper level and try to understand what these things are doing, why they're doing it. Like, even just if you look at our solar system, what the hell is the sun? What is our solar system? Why is this orbit even happening? Is this, it almost seems like it's a cell, you know? There's like a very intricate and perfect system by which this cell works. And the planet Earth, we're the mitochondria or something. We're a
Right.
particular part of the cell, just a piece of the cell. And in this piece of the cell, weird little dusts of life forms rise. And again, the only way we can truly understand our place within the cell, within the universe of the cell, is to get a bigger and a better insight on what the cell is, what the universe actually is. And I feel like we limit ourselves in our culture, man. With the the way we look at non-human intelligence, the way we look at spirituality and the mystery in general, I think we discount a lot of what we're seeing and a lot of what is trying to be shown to us.
Yeah, and I always find it crazy to deny, um, like, intelligence. like an intelligent creation, that this whole thing is just I don't find it to be random at all. But, it's just crazy, like, you mentioned the sun, and it's like, it's literally like a nuclear reactor just sitting at the absolute perfect distance to bring this ball called Earth that is just life. It is just consciousness, it's experience. And if it weren't for that reactor sitting at the perfect spot to make everything perfect, it's crazy. I mean, I'm reading Alien Information Theory right now, Andrew Gallimore, and he's basically talking about a perspective on the nature of reality, and um, kind of comparing reality to code, like, at the bottom basically, and I agree with this aspect of it. It's just like, it's it's everything is just complexifying. It's becoming more and more complex the further you go up. And, once you go to the spatial level, like the, solar system or whatever, there it's just forming more complex systems over and over again. And, you talk about how we in our modern age think about things like and like what is reality, and even as simple as like what reality is made of. We're so stuck in a materialistic like way of thinking of just like there's matter and everything is made up of that matter until it builds something else that's more matter and more matter and more matter. So that's like a very specific framing of what you're seeing of what reality is, rather than I've mentioned this to you before, I believe. There's like other ways you can view reality as it that doesn't have to be material. Like, instead of saying that I'm made of, uh, molecules or particles or atoms, whatever you want to say, I'm made of that. It's like what is actually happening, and I believe is that everything is made of holons. And I think I've told you about holons before. It's just everything is made of holons, and a holon is a whole that is made up of parts, wherein each part is another whole that is made of more parts that are made up of wholes, and so on. It's just fractal in nature, and it goes down. And it doesn't have to be like a physical thing. It's more mental. It's like we are just composed of wholes that are composed of parts, and it's just fractals all the way down and
Well,
up.
it's both physical and mental, and it's both inside and outside. Because we look at inside the body or outside the body or inside the earth or outside the earth or inside this microphone or outside the microphone, and like those things don't exist. And I think this hold on hypothesis is a very good representation of the fractal nature, as you said, of reality. And everything works. Everything fits within that paradigm correctly. And it
Right,
also then I like my mind goes to then, so like what are the spaces between the holes and the parts, you know? Like is that literal space? Are we like when we look up into space and we see the solar system and we see the galaxy, like is a solar system a whole made of parts, and then the galaxy is the whole made of those parts, and the universe is the whole, you know what I mean? Like
right, and
it
that's
almost
what yeah, go ahead.
it just it makes me wonder about the space between the holes and the space between the parts, and it's a very trippy thought.
Well, and that's the thing that's even interesting about, like, the space between, because like you said, there's no, inside or outside, like, and it's kinda the same with in between, like, everything as if even if you just look at it as, like, modern science, like, nothing is not touching, you know? Like, it's all like, it's air molecules to my hand molecules or whatever, like, so that it's all literally, in that perspective, touching anyways. And, you even think about, someone like Donald Hoffman, and he talks about how space-time isn't fundamental, which I agree with, and, he considers it to be kind of like, not really important at all as far as, like, the fundamental aspects, because I guess it falls apart at a relatively, uh, quick rate as far as when you go further down in scale. They're just, uh, time and space cease to really exist or be applicable at all. Um So I don't know, it's very interesting to think about.
Yeah, and these concepts to me especially the whole on concept and Donald Hoffman's ideas of reality. They just drive home the fact that this thing, us, everything around us, it's just all one. It's
Yeah,
all just
absolutely.
one.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, nothing exists if you take away like one piece of something, it ceases to be that thing. Basically, like for instance, like you look at like a car. I don't know. Let's use a car as an example. A car, as a whole, it's like, okay, that's what a car is. But if you take away oxygen, it's no longer a car because it can't combust and, move. If you take away one of the spark plugs, it's no longer a car. If you take away one piece of anything, it removes, even if you take away a piece of something that doesn't seem to make the thing what it is. I don't know. There's a really high connectivity that has to be in place.
Yeah, because everything is everything, and every piece, every whole needs all of the parts to make the whole, or the whole is no longer the whole. It's almost like if you think of it as a mandala, you can't like take a piece of the mandala away, because when you take a piece of the mandala away, you're compromising the entire symmetrical structure of the shape itself. So you
to
you can't take anything away. It
to
is
take
all
a
one.
yeah, to take a piece away, the whole thing is gone.
Or the whole thing changes. When you take a piece away, you morph it. It's almost like the law of entropy, right? It's like you can't take away or add to. All you can do is change and alter, because
Mm.
you're just altering the one.
And that's like a very, like, it's well known, but it's a very crazy thing about reality is like how, energy can't be created or destroyed. Like,
Is
we're
that it,
dealing
it
with
is that the law of entropy?
I think so. It might
That's
be,
what
I don't know.
okay. I might be
But
wrong
either
about that,
way
but that's what I was getting at when I said that.
but
Yeah.
yeah, but either way, it's like we're dealing with one piece of something, like, because you can't take away from it or add to it, it's all just going to transform. And, it makes you think, yeah, I don't it's a crazy it's a very, simple thing that I feel like we learn at a pretty young age. I think I've heard that, or like, it's a well-known concept, but, it's really mind-blowing when you think about it.
Yeah, it takes everything that you're brought up, at least in our culture, to believe into question, because everything that we believe is very isolated. Our culture is very individualistic. And, to me, when I think about these concepts as, they're unifying. And the more that we can understand these things as a collective, I think the more we're going to bring each other together. And hopefully, this can be the beginning of, ending wars and ending, um, conflict. And maybe, I don't like the idea of a one world government by any means, but I do think that we need a collective consciousness shift. And hopefully these types of things, the experiences that we have with non-human intelligences, spirituality, psychedelics can bring us closer to that.
Yeah. And, like, a one world government, it's, it's not inherently a bad thing. It's just us humans are so flawed right now. We aren't ready for that type of unity. Um, there needs to be, like, a grand awakening,
Yeah,
something like that.
the shift
And
in
it
consciousness has to come
yeah,
first.
and it's interesting, just to touch back on the UFO topic a bit. There's, like, there's a lot of crazy, like, lore and weird cliques within the UFO community that all believe weird things. Like, there's people that believe in, like, the reptilians that live underground, and these beings do this and whatever. But there's, some type of lore going on right now where they're talking about the year 2027. And
Mhm.
supposedly, it's talked about a lot even in, like, intelligence agencies. Like, there's something that they're interested about happening in 2027. And, some people speculate that it's gonna be like, "Oh, the aliens are coming. They're gonna reveal themselves," or, "So we need to roll this disclosure out so we're ready for it." Who knows what it would be. There's, like, another thing people think it's going to be like a great awakening, like instantly, like everyone's just gonna know the truth. Just like all our consciousness is just gonna shift. And for me, that would be nice. I would love that. But I don't feel like it can't be that easy. It's just not that easy, you know?
I was just gonna
You gotta
say,
put in
just
the work.
yeah.
You have
Yeah,
to.
there's a responsibility that we have. There's a reason we have free will, and it's because I think we're tasked with a certain responsibility to evolve our species.
Yeah, we're not gonna be just handed it. But there are
Mm-mm.
people in like the new age circles that believe that's something that will happen. Maybe not in 2027, but there's supposed to be an event. There's a lot of new age people that believe that. And it's interesting because I I texted you about this briefly, but like last week I had a dream, and in this dream basically that event happened, which was insane. Very insane. For me, I don't know if it's just because since I've taken psychedelics, but definitely since after I've taken psychedelics, in my dreams, I am able to have these mind-blowing, like, awakening experiences. Like, in this dream, it was like a really long, vivid dream, which isn't super unusual for me. I often have pretty long dreams, and they're often very vivid, or I recall them very vividly. Um but it was a long dream, and out of nowhere, at one point, I'm in a car driving with somebody, and out of nowhere, the sky turns completely red, and it just happened, like, in an instant. And, the dream is so vivid and it's so real. I'm not lucid, so I don't know this is a dream. I think it's just like I am right now. I'm just like, "This is reality. This is life. I'm in a car. Oh, shit, the sky turned red." And then these white lights start, like, shooting down all over, and instantly, like, it happened so fast, I'm thinking, "Oh, like, the sun just exploded, or asteroids are falling, like, this is the apocalypse. The world is over. I'm about to die, and everyone I know and love is about to die." So, it was, like, real, true horror and fear. Like, just unbelievable. Like, imagine yourself if that actually happened. That's how it felt. It was just the worst, and it happened so fast, and it went from, like, these white lights raining down, like, thick white, and they kinda, like, swirled, and it started looking like psychedelic, and this was, like, 5 seconds this happened. Started happening, and then it got brighter and brighter and brighter, and almost, like, too bright to see, and it was just like a whoosh, and I basically whited out, and for, like, a single moment, just, like, the tiniest moment you could imagine, just an instant, a single instant, it was like a full-blown, like, awakening experience, like, it to brightness to just everything, just and it wasn't like, "Oh, wow, this is amazing." Like, it was a single instant, so it just happened like that, like and it's funny because I don't believe in any great awakening theory like that would happen to the planet, but that's exactly what this was, and it was an instant, and it just shifted everything, and I was like the sky went back to normal. I looked to the person next to me just, like and they were, like, fully awake now. They're, like, looking at me like we understood everything, and, the dream ended shortly after, but it was basically a flash. I think they even in the new age, I think they even call it something like the flash. I don't know, but it was something like that. And yeah, it was such a powerful experience. The only thing I could compare it to is like a psychedelic experience, just condensed into a single moment of understanding. But it was powerful feeling, and like yeah, it was what I would imagine that type of experience would be if the sun decided to enlighten us all for no reason.
Amazing. Well, maybe there is hope that the sun will enlighten us.
Yeah,
Hopefully, it doesn't burn us alive in the process. But
yeah.